embarrassment there.
You're listening to Head South Radio with your host, Kat Meyer, a podcast dedicated to prioritizing pleasure and removing the stigma and shame around sex. We're here to be curious and have an open conversation about sexual health and relational wellness. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. The information discussed is not a substitute for professional medical advice.
Hey there, I'm Kat Meyer, the host of Head South Radio, and on today's episode, I'm speaking with Michaela, who is a Black queer sex educator and the founder of the Youth Sexpert program, a training program that aims to provide comprehensive sex education for high school enrolled youth. Her work focuses on how injustice manifests in sexual interactions. She also explores how stigma keeps us all from being our best selves, pleasure as a form of liberation, and how we can close the orgasm gap. In this episode, we talk about the work Tara is doing to create peer-to-peer support amongst teens when it comes to comprehensive, inclusive sex education. The Youth Sexpert program's mission resonates with me and my story as a teenager frustrated with the lack of sex education. So, in collaboration with tattoo artist Girl New York, Head South has designed a limited edition t-shirt with 20% of the proceeds going to the Youth Sexpert program. You can buy this shirt and other Head South provisions on our website, and that'll be linked in the show notes. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Tara. Happy listening! Hi.
Hi.
Tara, thank you so much for being on Head South Radio.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So we're going to get started with some icebreaker questions, and then we'll move into a little bit more about the work that you do and the Youth Sexpert program. So to get started, I'd love to know what your zodiac sign is and if you actually resonate with that sign.
I am a Scorpio. I don't know a ton about horoscopes. I know that Scorpios are supposed to be very sexual, which I somewhat resonate with, and very mysterious, which I definitely don't resonate with. I'm such an open book. But yeah, again, I'm not a huge horoscope person, but I love when other people tell me about horoscopes because people are so interested in it, and it's not for me, but it's really fun to hear about.
Those little details. Can I ask what your moon and rising sign are? Do you know the other two placements, or you don't?
I think I have something in, oh my gosh, Gemini, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. One of those something is Gemini. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Geminis are very academic and like love knowledge.
I could see that.
Okay, so what fictional world or place would you like to visit? So that could be like in books or television, movies, media, like a fictional space and place and time that you would like to visit. So you don't have to live there forever.
That is so hard. I am obsessed with like the Hunger Games, but I would never want to go there.
Mm-hmm.
That is my like dystopian obsession.
Uh-huh.
But I would maybe say like Narnia always seemed really cool.
Mm-hmm. That
would probably be my top pick.
Okay, cool. And then what is your favorite time of day and why?
My favorite time of day, I'm a huge night owl. I love being up in like the wee hours of the night when nobody else is up. And I think I like it because nobody else is up and it feels like alone time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of feels like time stands still, like you're not like watching the clock or anything. Because you're not really supposed to be awake anyways, but I always wake up in the middle of the night and it's my favorite time to be awake.
That's interesting. I used to like study a lot about sleep and sleep patterns and sleep behaviors. And one of the things that we used to like wake up in the middle of the night, like that was part of like the culture to wake up at a lot of people wake up between the hours of like 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. And that was a time when they used to wake up and like do things, but like maybe read a book or be a little bit quieter, but there was that space in that pocket of time. And so for some of us, like that's actually the normal rhythm to like nap during the day and wake up in the middle of the night and have some productive hours as well. And so like for myself, I have the same thing. Sometimes that happens and then I'm like super creative and there's like all of these ideas and a lot of space in that weird kind of like witching hour kind of thing of like, and I agree with you. Like sometimes it's just because everyone else is asleep. There's not a lot going on that you just feel like space and time doesn't exist. So you have more room. So then would you rather have the best sex of your life once or mediocre sex every day?
Oh my God. That is such a hard question. I don't know. I might honestly go with mediocre sex every day. I think the best sex of your life once, like, I guess I just really like the idea of like having something to look forward to. So I think if I already knew that the best had happened, that kind of ruins the idea of having something to look forward to, something to be hopeful about. And I also think like best sex of your life, like I think a huge part of sex to me is like connection. And so I feel like the frequency at which I have sex matters a lot because it helps me feel more connected to whoever I'm having sex with, as opposed to just the best sex of your life once. So I think that would be my answer.
Yeah, I'd probably go with the same answer. And I also feel like there's a lot of reasons that make something the best. Like there is no, like for me personally, there's no ultimate like experience. There's like so many
Right.
different nuanced experiences that happen over time. And so, yeah, I would agree with that choice. Would you rather shop for sex toys or lingerie?
Right now, I would say lingerie. I think
Mm-hmm.
I have maxed out my sex toy collection. I just think we're at the point where, I mean, of course, you can have, an infinite number, of course, like it can keep building and keep growing, but there are only so many that I'm going to use.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really love the idea of like using a sex toy once and then not again. So if I kind of have a toy and I think that it's something I'll maybe use once or twice and then go back to like one of my, my favorite toys, I'll end up just not taking it or giving it to a friend or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think right now I'm definitely more in need of lingerie.
Would you rather be gifted flowers or candy from a partner?
That's hard because I have a huge sweet tooth. I also am like entering my plant era and I just love
Mm.
having plants and flowers and beautiful things around me. So I think maybe right now I would say flowers.
Would you rather tie someone up or be tied up?
I would rather, oh, that's hard too. Because both, like, I feel like my answer is both. I would maybe say tie someone up.
Okay. Would you rather use a dildo or a vibrator?
A vibrator, 100%. It's an easy answer for me.
Would you rather have morning sex or late night sex?
Morning sex, another easy answer for me.
And then, would you rather never have oral sex again or never have penetrative sex again?
Never have penetrative sex again. Another easy. Yeah,
I got those. Those are easy. Don't have to think
definitely.
about it. Yeah. Okay, so now we can get into more of the interview component of the podcast. And so, if you wouldn't mind explaining to our listeners who you are, how you got into the field that you're in, and what you're doing with the Youth Sexpert program.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Tara. I've been doing sex ed for the last 4 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
What that's meant for me has mostly been content creation, writing for different publications about sex and sexuality, and then occasionally public speaking. And it's really something that I got interested in when I was in college. I came into college on a pre-law track and very quickly switched it up and started taking on this sex educator role, which was very, very different. I think my interest was sparked by quite a few things, but I think social media was always a really big component. I've always been, like I said, a very open book person. And so when I was in high school, actually, I had a fake Instagram account where I would sort of talk about my sex life and my relationship to my body and, what I was experiencing and sexism and all of these issues that I really cared about, queerness. And I think having those conversations in that sort of curated, intimate digital space, it made me realize how much, I guess, these topics were resonating with people around me, particularly like young women around me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think when I was in college and starting to think about how can I kind of turn this thing that I've already been doing into something bigger, it was no surprise to anybody who was on that account that doing sex ed would be something that I'm interested in doing, because those were the kind of the conversations I was already having.
Mm-hmm.
But then it really became about educating myself as much as possible. So just taking these sort of unconventional routes to learn as much as I possibly could, picking up sex books where I could, taking as many elective courses in my college as I could that had anything to do with sex and sexuality, listening to podcasts, following folks on social media, just trying to soak in as much as I possibly could. And so after I think about a year of really just taking the time to hunker down and educate myself, that's when I started creating content. I started out writing, and then that turned into more like video content. But that really helped me unlock some other passions of mine too. I love to write. I love to edit videos. I love to film. And so it's been a really amazing journey of doing that. And in that journey, most of the content that I was making, most of what I was doing was geared towards folks who were my age, college age, or potentially like a little older.
Mm-hmm.
But I always knew that I really specifically could have used a better sex education while I was in high school. And I think a lot of what I was doing as a sex educator was on behalf of my high school self. I really was kind of trying to be the person that girl needed. And so I started thinking, what would it look like if there were high schoolers who were able to take on a similar community role to the one that I'm taking on right now? And that's kind of where the idea of the Youth Sexpert program was born. So we started last November, and it was really just me. I had applied for a fiscal sponsorship, so that's a way that we could get our nonprofit status. So it was me and a sort of our parent company, if you will. But then it quickly grew to become an advisory board and then a staff. And it definitely grew beyond what I could have imagined, especially at the rate at which it's grown. But I'm very, very grateful because there's absolutely no way that I could be doing this by myself. And having a whole team of people here, literally just because of an idea, is pretty amazing.
Congratulations, by the way. That's
Thank
incredible.
you.
I had known that from speaking to your communications manager, Maddie, about how quickly that kind of dream to reality happened and how quickly a lot of people came together. And so that's how I found you guys, was through Dirty Lola, when I met at Shag in Brooklyn, just in passing. And then Lola told me about you guys and the work she was doing, because we often have our guests choose a nonprofit or an organization to support and fundraise for per episode. And we kind of want to promote organizations like yourself that are doing this type of work. And so when she told me about you guys, that story resonated so well with me. Like, it really hit a chord, because that's exactly what my experience was like 20 some years ago in high school, being 17 and going to Walden Books and Barnes and Nobles and looking up everything I could, and going to the library and even buying like men's magazines, Playboys, everything I could, and like pulling together and making a notebook of information for myself and my friends around predominantly pleasure, because a lot of what we had received in sex education was preventative, like preventing pregnancy, preventing STIs. So when Lola told me about you guys, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I wish I could have been a part of that program, because that's exactly what I was doing when I was 17. And so it really, what you created and what you are working on is totally inspiring. It's amazing. And so thank you for that. First of all, thank you for creating this, because I think so many teens need this type of program. And then I would love to know what your sex education was like. So you mentioned what you've created is what you wanted to give the teenage version of yourself. So what was your sex education like?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like this was a question that I got asked a lot even before creating the Youth Sexpert program, even just as a sex educator. I think the assumption is, like, if you're pushed to do this work, that you probably had some traumatizing experience in high school sex ed or middle school sex ed or whatever. For me, I really do count my blessings. I was raised in Massachusetts, which is generally on the more liberal side, and sex ed is a bigger priority than it is in some other states. And so we did have something, and I'm very much aware that it's on the better end of the spectrum as far as things go. We did get conversations about birth control. We did get conversations about STIs and conversations, I think, a little bit on healthy relationships. And that was about it. So definitely missing the pleasure component, definitely missing a lot of important aspects of just anatomy and understanding your own body. Absolutely missing queerness, a lot of topics that I particularly would have loved to have included. And so that's honestly shown me that even on the best of the spectrum, on the better end of the spectrum, it's still not great. There's still so much that we're missing. Yeah, I think especially in starting YSP as well, we've done a lot of research into what the national standards are for sex education while we were building out our own curriculum. And I think even while we were building it out, not having a full understanding at that time of what sex ed looks like on a national level, we kind of knew that we were creating something that felt revolutionary. It felt like, oh my God, are we allowed to be talking to kids about this? We really had to sit down and ask ourselves what were the topics that we wish that we had in sex education, as opposed to like, what are other people doing, or like, what do we think that it would be comfortable to talk to high schoolers about? We had to push all of those things to the side and think about what we would have wanted at that age. And so I think looking at a lot of those national standards, you do realize that even if you were to follow every single one, you would still be missing so much. So it's kind of scary how far back we are, I think, generally as a country, even when it comes to states that are like doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pushing and including and offering more, or like updating the curriculum itself. Because I think that there's a lot of that. There's like some states that there's no curriculum, there's no education whatsoever, and then in others, like where you grew up, there's a little bit more progression, a little bit more inclusion, but it's all still across the board so lacking. You're absolutely right. And so I think what's cool with what you guys are doing is you're not only like, I love that of like, well, what do we want to know? What did we want to know when we were that age? And I'm sure you've had conversations with teenagers right now of like, what are you looking for, to meet them where they're at, versus like, I think a outdated version of this is like, these are the things, and these aren't even tools or resources that help you. It's just, here's prevention, here's this. And it's a very mechanical, technical to say, and not so emotional. There's not a lot of relational availability there. There's not a lot of like human experience, like sex includes the emotions around it. And let's have conversations about that, or conversations around consent. That's starting to become a newer component to, I think, sex education, but I think it's still not like fully thought through. And so can you give us an idea of what this program, because you just started, I think last week, you just kind of kicked off the inaugural cohort program. So what does this look like? How, if I'm going to assume a lot of our listeners are parents.
Yeah.
So if these are parents of younger children, or like junior high age children, or people who have high schoolers in their lives, and they're listening to this, how do you explain to people, like, this is what it looks like? This is, how consenting adults are involved. And can you give us a little background on how this program works?
Totally. So logistically, we meet weekly over Zoom. Typically at the same time. We find a time that works for most people's schedules. Students have had to not only apply, but also parents have had to fill out consent forms. That's something that we really wanted to do, just to make sure that this was an individual decision that students were making with their families, as opposed to going through the school system, or that it's something that they feel like they need to do in secret. And so beyond those logistics, week by week, we hit a new topic. And so designing our curriculum, we knew that we wanted those topics to move from the interpersonal, so thinking about topics like self-pleasure or like porn media literacy, things that are just about our bodies and ourselves and our minds, thinking about body positivity and neutrality. That's another topic that we're covering. Before we move on to partnered interactions, that's sort of the second umbrella where we do the interpersonal. So we're thinking about consent, communication, and all the topics that fall under those interpersonal, just thinking about one person and another person. And then our third umbrella sort of being beyond what normative sexuality is. So thinking about queerness, thinking about disability, thinking about all of these things that aren't conventionally included in sex education, but are certainly a part of what diverse sexuality is. And so really, really wanting to include that. And I think that's where we have the bulk of our guest educator lessons, because of course that there are so many topics that can be spoken to best from people who are in these groups, who are experiencing these things, and who have that, embodied experience and knowledge. And so that's a huge priority for us as well. But that is a little bit about what our program looks like. We did just have our first meeting, which was super, super exciting. It's been really insane watching this come to life.
And then are the parents, like, do the parents receive the curriculum, or is there like a way, because you mentioned that it's like a priority to have like the family unit involved or guardians involved, and it's not like some secret thing that the teenager is kind of like doing on the side or hiding. And like, yeah, there's a lot of information on TikTok and on Instagram right now, and there's a lot of sex education, and some of it's amazing and incredible, and some of it can be somewhat damaging or not so accurate. And so how do you guys involve the parents, if at all?
Yeah, we have given the parents an outline of the curriculum. I think from a legal perspective, we wanted to make it as similar to what it looks like for parents to opt in or opt out of classes in, school sex education. So they have had an outline and been able to opt in or opt out of certain classes. Of course, we've had parents here and there who were maybe a little bit more resistant towards having their children participate. But for the most part, we've been really pleasantly surprised by how many parents have opted into every single lesson and seem really, really open to this. That was a huge part of the conversation that we had with our students last week around what does it look like to talk to your parents about sex. And I was blown away by how many of the students' parents seem so much more open to these conversations than my parents were at that time. And so that has been really cool to witness. And it makes me feel like things are generally changing in the world, which has been really awesome. But yeah, so I think both in having parents be able to look at the curriculum, be able to opt in and opt out, and then also facilitating conversations with the kids, because it's not just about giving them the sex education. It's also about how do they want to bring up these conversations in their real lives. And so those are conversations that we're also having in the programming.
Yeah, that was the next thing, is like, you're not just providing sex education. So yes, you're filling in some holes that in, like we mentioned, certain states, some children, some teenagers are not receiving at all. So there's a filling in of a hole, but there's also this goal of empowering these kids to be able to communicate with one another, or communicate, like you said, with their parents about this subject matter. So there's a whole nother level on top of like your curriculum of like communication skills, right? And like making things feel organic or natural, and not like, like the after school special videos that you'd be watching. Like that was my generation of like a videotape after school special of like kids going through crisis, and like Billy has a cigarette, like things like that. And you watch these poor actors try and reenact a scenario of like, we don't have a condom, things like that. And it's like, that's not
Right.
realistic. And everyone's rolling their eyes or feeling so uncomfortable in those experiences. So how do you you're not a peer, you're an adult who's training these kids on communication, and you're closer in age than I think a lot of their sex educators or educators in general might be for them. So it feels a little bit more safe, I think, just from a peer or almost peer standpoint, or you can relate to them. But how do you work with them on communication skills? Because that is something that's a big thing that I keep talking about, is like, we're never taught relational or communication skills. And that should be a part of like life education, like within the curriculum. Like, we don't need algebra. Yeah. We need to learn how to communicate. We need to learn how to relate to one another. So how have you guys built that into your program?
Yeah, that is definitely, I think, our first sort of iteration of the curriculum was very like, how can we include every topic under the umbrella of sex ed? And then sort of going through and building out what are our activities going to be and how are we going to make this kind of like you were saying about not only sex education, but how they want to initiate these conversations. And so that has been something that we've sort of baked into every single session. I think a lot of the specifics of what we're trying to teach have really come from my own trial and error process as somebody who does this and has been doing this for years now. Things that I hadn't even necessarily thought of, like how can you reassure somebody that you are trustworthy, and like when they have no reason to necessarily believe that, but also nowhere else to go with very intimate and personal questions. It's like a very delicate place to be, and I've sort of had to navigate that on my own many a time. And so being able to bring that up as a conversation where some people might not even think about that before taking on a role like this.
Yes. Yeah. So you've kind of layered that onto each part of the curriculum. And so how has that been going?
It's been going well. I think also thinking about social media as a tool, and this program has been all about how students want to take this information and use it themselves. We don't want to sort of mandate that students give any sort of presentation, or there's no formal sort of end of program event or anything like that, but it's all about how they want to use the information. And so if they do choose to use social media, talking about how that can be a tool, talking about social media censorship and why it exists, and how to avoid it. And yeah, that's also been a huge part of things, how to be able to look at sources and sort of debunk them if need be, or, see if they, hold up. So that has also been a part.
Let's take a quick break. Are you tired of the hormonal roller coaster that comes with birth control pills? 11 years ago, I decided to ditch hormonal birth control and embark on a journey to find a more natural alternative. Over the years, I've used condoms, calendar tracking methods, and withdrawal, which can sometimes be pretty risky and stress-inducing practices. However, I've discovered a game changer, Natural Cycles. It's an FDA-cleared birth control app that has brought me peace of mind like never before. Whether you're planning or preventing pregnancy, Natural Cycles has got your back. Let's talk about numbers for a moment, even though I hate numbers. Natural Cycles is 98% effective when used properly. And here's the best part. You're not putting any extra hormones into your body. It's all about understanding your cycle and making informed decisions. Ready to start your hormone-free birth control journey? Use the link in our episode description to get 15% off the annual subscription for Natural Cycles. That's right, 15% off to take charge of your reproductive health in a natural and effective way. Say goodbye to those hormonal ups and downs and hello to a birth control approach that aligns with your body. And now back to our episode. How do you, as the Youth Sexpert program, navigate the social media censorship? Because like I myself with Head South, we've been dealing with that, and like it's really frustrating at times because I know that some of our content is right in line with bigger accounts. We don't need to name some of these, like very sex-driven accounts and informational, educational, all of the above. But it's kind of this funny thing where you get a message saying you're like kind of on a restriction until you remove certain content or review your content or censor yourself. But then when I look at other accounts and I'm like, they're saying the same thing so explicitly. Some of their imagery is so explicit, certain podcasts or certain brands or things like that. And I'm like, it's a frustrating thing. And I know it's a topic that's going around right now in the sex education realm, because a lot of sex positive accounts, whether it's sex education or not, sex positive accounts have been kind of under attack all summer. And I've witnessed a lot of people, educators I follow, kink experts, all of the above under this umbrella of sexual wellness getting kicked off, getting frozen. Like our account got frozen. So how do you guys navigate, especially because you're speaking to parents as well as teens. And so that's also like this kind of precarious area where it's like, oh yeah, you're kind of under a lot of scrutiny in like your language and who you're communicating with or who your audience is, right?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, that's definitely the world that I sort of came from. I think once I started doing sex ed on social media, I also started, contributing to different sexual wellness companies, their social media accounts, or helping them with their social media presence. And so that's been an ongoing conversation that I feel like I've been a part of for the last 4 years. And seeing, like you're saying, these sort of big sweeps that platforms like Meta will do, or even Twitter at times, it is super scary. And I think having an understanding of where it comes from, that it's so profit driven, it's coming from, these platforms wanting to avoid any legal liability and therefore not being able to make as much money because of their possible connections to sex trafficking and under fossa sesta and things like that. Once you do view it as sort of a profit thing as opposed to necessarily like an ethics or a morals thing, nobody's trying to really protect the kids or whatever they're saying that they might be doing. You really do understand why some accounts are able to stay and some aren't. And it's extremely frustrating and it can feel really anxiety inducing. And, you can feel powerless in a number of ways. I know that that's something I've definitely felt for as long as I've had my personal platform. And the funny thing is, with my personal platform and with certain brand platforms that I've also helped to run, I've felt like I would make my decisions and try to stay more on the safer end of things. I would, censor every single word that could possibly be sex related. I would try to avoid linking out to different sites that were explicitly sexual in any way. I would follow every single rule to like a T. And it's funny because I think with the youth Sexpert program, because we were such a small account at first and just trying to grow, it felt like we were able to sort of take more risks and, be able to talk about sex more explicitly than I've even been able to do on my personal account. And that was something that was really fun and exciting for me. And also, as a social media strategist, there are certain ways in which those risks can really pay off. When people know exactly what you're talking about and don't have to guess, that can absolutely boost your engagement. And I think that that's something that we've seen help contribute to our growth. So it's a hard balance between wanting to obviously stay on these apps to still have a platform, but also like we can do what we want to do in terms of destigmatizing sex and sexuality better when we're just being straight up about whatever it is we're talking about. And of course, it's helping boost our engagement. It's helping people know exactly what it is that we're talking about. It's helping facilitate these conversations better, the less that we censor ourselves. So just kind of, it's nearly impossible. And it's unbelievably frustrating, I think, for anybody who talks about sex on the internet in any capacity.
Yeah. It's a definitely a balance. And I go through these stages of like, I go back and forth between like censoring and like saying things like schmorgasm and hating that because it does affect how we communicate. And so self-censoring for survival on a platform, it's just kind of this interesting thing of like, I know that they have the technology and they have the funding to create something that would allow for accounts to just be identified as educational and target certain audiences and protect, like to your point of like, they're using the guise of like protection and but it's also profit. And so like I believe there is a measure and a means to like allow for education, insight, information to be shared without having to self-censor or censor in any way. And then also do the thing that they're claiming to do, which is like protect people. I think there is an opt-in and opt-out option that should be available for that. Like if you don't want your kids to see this material, then create a setting, right? That's
right.
It's kind of an easy solution if you're trying to protect people, or like why are there children on the internet? Like why are young kids able to access this when technically you're supposed to be 16 or 17 on Instagram? Like to have an actual account and to have email and stuff like that, you have to be a certain age. And so it's like, well, how are these kids getting access to that too? But anyways, that's like a whole nother conversation around censorship and protecting kids. But I think what you guys are doing is empowering teenagers and also opening up conversation, like you said, to families, and like opening yourselves up to like, wow, this is possible. And like, it's very cool to see in real time, like the work that you envision, or like the dreams that you have that you might not have thought were possible a year ago. Like, can we actually get this to happen? Can we make that happen? Can we get parents to support this? Can we find the means to get this across the country and have kids participating from all over? That's really cool and incredible. And you should be very proud of yourself. It's something to be very, very noted. That's a huge achievement. So Tara, is there anything that we missed that you wanted to share about yourself, about the Youth Sexpert program that you feel like maybe people might need to hear before we wrap it up?
Yeah. The only thing that comes to mind, we had spoken briefly about, so since the Youth Sexpert program is a fall program, we as a staff sort of given ourselves the spring to get a bunch of things in order, something that we were in talks of doing even before this semester that just sort of we didn't end up having time for, and it's getting pushed now to the spring, is doing an event with educators and working with some educator groups that we are in community with. And then that has grown to what would it look like to do an event for parents. And so that's something that we're in talks about right now, and I think would be really, really cool. I don't see why we wouldn't do it. So hopefully that's something we'll have more updates on. We do have quite a few social media accounts. Some of them are more student facing and some of them are more parent facing. Our director of parent advocacy, she is the person who runs a lot of the social media accounts that are a bit more parent facing, like Facebook, LinkedIn, things like that. We have a ton of great resources for parents on our LinkedIn, actually. And so I think that's probably where that conversation would happen around what it would look like to have that event. So hopefully that is something that we can do in the spring.
Oh, amazing. That's very exciting. And so, yeah, we will include all of the contact information for you for the Youth Sexpert program in our show notes. And then also people can follow your main account on Instagram, which is...
My account is Tara Michaela.
And then the Youth Sexpert account is
the Youth Sexpert program with instead of SEX, S3X.
Yes.
Because
so that
censorship.
Because censorship, yeah. So the E is a 3. So people can find you guys there and then kind of stay tuned for what's coming in like the spring for a different type of event or a different type of community building program. So this specifically follows kind of like the school year for the Youth Sexpert program, is what I'm understanding. Like kind of go through September to like the fall into winter semester, and then spring you're going to kind of expand it out or like kind of grow and do some activations with parents or adults. Very cool. Tara, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time and I hope you have a lovely day.
I hope you have a lovely day too. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Special thanks to all of our guests. Head South is hosted by Kat Meyer, produced by Isis Barlow, edited by Megan Hook, with music by Lily Rezi Rothman, graphics by Ella Chodos Irvine, cover art by Gina Ship Casey, and intro by Murph Meyer.
If you're looking for